The mysterious death of Sani Abacha. What really happened in Aso Villa? On the 7th of June, 1998, the Nigerian head of state, General Sani Abacha, was alive and in total control of the country. He had ruled Nigeria for 5 long years with iron fists, feared at home and condemned abroad. That day, he welcomed Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat to Abuja, a meeting that seemed routine. He was reportedly calm, smiling, full of his usual confidence. No one watching him that afternoon could have predicted that he had less than 24 hours to live. Inside Aso Rock, the presidential villa built for the highest office in Nigeria, all appeared normal. Later that evening, Abacha received a mild medical treatment, an injection administered by his personal physician, Dr. Sadiq Suleiman Wali. It was supposed to help him relax. The doctor, by all accounts, found nothing unusual. He would later insist that Abacha was in good health. There were no signs of stress, no panic, no mysterious visitors. Contrary to swirling rumors that would later flood the streets, there were no women present, no Indians, no spiked drinks, just the general, his aides, and a quiet night. But the stillness of that night would not last. At 5 a.m. the next morning, June 8, 1998, the alarm was raised. Major Hamza al-Mustafa, Abacha's chief security officer, was summoned. Something was terribly wrong. The head of state was found unconscious, gasping for air, foaming at the mouth, and shaking. Panic spread. Al-Mustafa raced to his room. Doctors were called. Dr. Wali arrived again, this time to a far graver scene. He administered injections. He attempted resuscitation. He took blood and hair samples. But there was nothing he could do. Sani Abacha, military ruler, feared autocrat, and one of the most powerful men in Africa, was dead. The corridors of Aso Villa froze. The generals and officials who surrounded Abacha were suddenly lost in uncertainty. For 5 years, Nigeria had been held together, or held down, by one man. That man was now gone. But his death was not announced to the public. Not yet. By 9 a.m., unusual activity had begun around the villa. Military vehicles moved in. Roads were sealed. The International Conference Center, where Abacha was scheduled to appear that morning, was abruptly closed. Even journalists were turned away. The air was thick with unease. Nigeria's most guarded location had turned into a fortress. But outside the gates, the whispers were spreading. By mid-morning, parts of Lagos were erupting in celebration. Yes, celebration. People danced in the streets. They sang songs, clapped hands, and shouted with joy. Abacha ti lo si empire, they cried in Yoruba. Abacha has gone to the empire. For many Nigerians, especially those in the south, Abacha's death was seen as an act of divine deliverance. In Kano, his home city in the north, the reactions were more subdued. Some mourned. Others stayed silent. Even the emir of Kano, who had reportedly been at odds with Abacha and feared dethronement, remained calm, perhaps even relieved. In a country as vast and divided as Nigeria, reactions to his death mirrored the regions themselves, shaped by history, ethnicity, and pain. Back inside Aso Rock, the machinery of the state sprang into action. The question was no longer what happened, but what happens now. General Hamza al-Mustafa, ever the strategist, knew this was no time for hesitation. He ordered the transfer of all condemned prisoners from the villa security cells. This included Lieutenant General Oladipo Dia, Abacha's former deputy, who had been accused of plotting a coup against him the year before. Al-Mustafa was determined. No chaos. No escapees. No coups. He worked quickly to preserve the chain of command and prevent any faction from seizing control. By noon, meetings were being held in hushed rooms within Aso Villa. First, among senior officers and trusted aides. Then, more urgently, by members of the Provisional Ruling Council, the military body that ruled Nigeria. The goal was clear: confirm the death, prepare the burial, and appoint a new head of state. That same afternoon, a convoy left the villa quietly. Its destination, Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport. Inside an ambulance lay the body of General Sani Abacha, wrapped in a white cloth, his face no longer feared but frozen. Riding behind him was his widow, Mariam Abacha, weeping in silence. The procession drove through Abuja as bystanders looked on, some in shock, others in open joy. They knew what had happened. And they knew this was the end of an era. The journey continued to Kano, where Abacha's body was received without ceremony. There was number 21 gun salute. No national day of mourning. No presidential funeral. Only a swift Islamic burial, conducted by the chief imam of Kano. The location was Abacha's private residence on Jidado Road. By 9:45 p.m., he was buried, his body lowered into the earth in quiet haste. A ruler who lived in grandeur was buried in simplicity. Back in Abuja, the gears of government moved swiftly. That same evening, General Abdul Salami Abubakar, Chief of Defense Staff, was sworn in as the new head of state. He was considered a compromise figure, calm, neutral, and not overly ambitious. The generals agreed on one thing: the country could not afford a power struggle. Within weeks, Abubakar began the process that would return Nigeria to civilian rule. Within a year, elections were held. A new republic, the Fourth Republic, was born. But the mystery of Sani Abacha's death would not fade. Officially, it was listed as a heart attack. But few Nigerians believed it. Some whispered of poison, delivered in a drink, or by a foreign agent, or perhaps by someone very close to him. Others claimed he had been cursed, or that he had seen something in his final moments that no man should see. The most common rumors involved women, Indian prostitutes said to have seduced and drugged him. These stories were salacious, widely repeated, and mostly discredited. But they fed the hunger for answers in a nation starved of transparency. Dr. Wali, the only doctor who attended to Abacha that morning, always stood by his statement: there was no evidence of foul play. No autopsy was conducted. No inquiry was opened. And so, the truth, if it exists, was buried along with him. To understand why so many were willing to believe anything about his death, one must remember the fear that Abacha inspired. During his rule, journalists were jailed, activists disappeared, and prominent figures were executed. The most shocking case was the hanging of Ken Saro-Wiwa, the Ogoni environmentalist whose death sparked global outrage. Abacha's government was ruthless. He had no known successor. He trusted few. And he ruled as if he would live forever. But on June 8, 1998, death came unannounced. The walls of Aso Villa, thick as they were, could not keep it out. For many Nigerians, his passing marked more than the end of a dictator. It marked the beginning of a new chapter, a moment when the country could exhale, however briefly. It was a reminder that power, no matter how absolute, is never eternal. That the mighty, too, are mortal. Today, over 2 decades later, the name Abacha still divides opinion. Some remember him as a necessary force, a strongman who imposed discipline in a chaotic country. Others see him as a tyrant, whose greed and brutality damaged Nigeria in ways that still linger. Billions of dollars stolen under his regime were later traced to bank accounts in Switzerland, the UK, and beyond. Even in death, Abacha's shadow followed Nigeria, his loot repatriated in tranches, his legacy debated in classrooms, markets, and parliaments. And yet, his end came without warning. Quietly. Suddenly. Inside the guarded walls of the presidential villa. June 8, 1998, is a day etched into Nigerian history, not just as the day a man died, but the day a nation began to wake from a nightmare. Because in the story of Sani Abacha's final hours, there lies a simple truth, that even the most powerful man in the country cannot escape the judgment of time, or the silence that follows his last breath.